Dr. John Collis, a patriarch of the community, was a generous patron to the museum. John's visionary gift established a legacy spotlighting his personal heritage and passion for art and life. For this and so much more, we extend our enduring love to John and his entire family.
Dr. Collis, in my opinion, was the gentleman surgeon. He was an expert in his field, extremely energetic, hardworking, and generous. I gleaned an awful lot in the 15 years that I knew him, and I'm very blessed to have had that opportunity. I think in a simple word, he could be described as a mentor.
He proved to be not only a great benefactor and a patron of the church, but a good friend. Our friendship lasted until his passing just last year. But it was a friendship that was based on mutual respect and admiration. We will miss him greatly, but we admired him, and we truly wondered how is it possible that he could have done as much as he did for the thousands of people that he served and ministered to in his long life as a physician.
John and I go back many, many years, and I have always held him in high esteem, admiration, and respect. One of the greatest characteristics of John was his humility. Whatever he did in a silent manner. It took years before I finally learned what a successful, prominent surgeon and physician he was. He never talked about his personal accomplishments, which were so great and helped so many people. Whether he taught in his local parish Sunday school, or whether he served on the highest boards with the Archbishop and other dedicated faithful stewards. He lived his life through his church and his family, and he was a living example of what we all should be today.
The lecture is a reflection of the intellectual curiosity of John Collis, his love of people, his belief in continued learning, and his deep interest in Greek culture. I was immediately struck by John's personal warmth, his devotion to family and church, his pride in his Greek heritage, and his desire to provide a lasting gift that would honor that heritage. I also discovered that he was an excellent conversationalist and a skilled storyteller. He was a generous and giving man.
He began his practice in 1963 after completing a residency at the Cleveland Clinic, and went on to become a pioneer in the spine field. He treated more than 400,000 patients and performed 17,000 surgeries throughout his career. He is considered by many of his peers as a pioneer and innovator who revolutionized the field of spinal care. I will always remember Dr. Collis. My life is better for having had him in it.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Heather Brown, the Virginia N. and Randall J. Barbado Deputy Director and Chief Curator. I'm so glad to welcome you today in person to this year's Dr. John and Helen Collis Lecture. As some of you may know, Dr. John Collis passed away in November of 2020, and the tribute video that we just played a moment ago was a collection of remembrances by colleagues and friends of John. He and his wife, Helen, have been great supporters and longtime patrons of CMA, and like John's family and friends, I miss his sparkling intelligence, his warmth, his kindness, and his dedication to his family and community. This lecture today is made possible through the Dr. John and Helen Collis Family Endowment Fund, and we are grateful to all of the Collis family for their support of new scholarship related to ancient Greek and Byzantine art. It's thanks to the Collis' generosity that each year we can bring to Cleveland an outstanding scholar in these fields. So I have the privilege today of introducing Seth Pevnik, who has recently been promoted to Chair of European Art from Classical Antiquity to 1800, and he is, of course, also our Curator of Greek and Roman Art. Now, in 2015, Seth, who was then the Chief Curator and Richard E. Perry Curator of Greek and Roman Art at the Tampa Museum of Art in Florida, he was a Collis lecturer, and he delivered a lecture entitled Poseidon and the Sea, Myth, Cult, and Daily Life, in which he explored the far-reaching impact of the Olympian god upon the art and culture of ancient Greece. The lecture was based on Seth's traveling exhibition that he curated in Tampa, and CMA loaned to his exhibition, as did a number of other important museums. Well, 4 years later, in 2019, Seth joined our staff at the CMA as Curator of Greek and Roman Art. He had long known our collection here, and he had fond memories of his time as a Collis lecturer. At the CMA, Seth is responsible for researching, presenting, and augmenting the art of the ancient Mediterranean world. His primary focus is as a scholar on Greek vases, and last fall he taught a course on this subject at Case Western Reserve University. He's spoken and written on numerous vase painting topics over the years, and last month we acquired a just acquired a new Greek vase, well, an ancient one, but it's new to us. It's on the back of our members magazine, so if you have one at home, take a look at it. It's a black figure lekythos, and it's in the Collis family galleries. This fall, Seth is finalizing some new interpretive didactics for all of our Greek vases that I think will show them in a wonderful new light. And he has also recently been studying our celebrated sculpture of Apollo, made in bronze, and he's been working very closely with our objects conservator, Colleen Snyder. And in fact, Seth and Colleen have just returned from Budapest, where they spoke about our Apollo at an international bronze Congress there. They will be sharing their findings in a CMA lunchtime lecture on Tuesday, November 1st. So come and hear from Seth and Colleen then. We're looking forward to Seth's upcoming exhibition at CMA that will be called Named and Unnamed. It will explore a key paradox in ancient Greek art, that names that survive and signatures rarely align with artists who are most celebrated in ancient literature. Seth's exhibition will explore the significance or perhaps insignificance of the artist's name and signature in ancient Greece and help visitors more fully understand what can and cannot be known about these artists. And Seth will now introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you so much, Heather, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody, for taking time on, I guess, a somewhat rainy Sunday afternoon to join us for today's Collis Lecture. It is really exciting for me to be standing here speaking to all of you, even for just a few minutes. It's been quite a long time, as I'm sure you all know, since any of us has had the opportunity to stand up here and look out at an auditorium that is full of actual people. So after many years, it seems, of Zoom calls and virtual events, it is so exciting to have the Collis Lecture back as a fully in-person event. As Heather alluded to, the Collis Lecture is particularly special for me because it really was my experience delivering the Collis Lecture back in 2015 that helped to convince me of how special Cleveland and the CMA really are, long before I imagined that I might have the opportunity eventually to work here. And now that I've been here for several years, I'm even more sure of what a special place this is. And it's been a lot of fun for me the last couple of days to show off the museum and the city of Cleveland to this year's Collis Lecturer, Phoebe Segal. And that's really the reason I'm up here, is to introduce her. So enough about me. Phoebe and I first met, believe it or not, in Athens in the last millennium. In 1999, many years ago, we were both fortunate enough to work on the excavations of the Athenian Agora, the marketplace at the center of the most famous city in Greece, literally in the shadow of the Acropolis. Phoebe, at that point, had just graduated from Brown University, where she wrote a BA thesis on Attic black figure pottery from religious sanctuaries. And she soon moved on to Columbia University, where she earned a master's as well as a PhD, writing a dissertation that explored large-scale votive sculptural monuments in archaic Greek sanctuaries. In addition to her time working in the Agora in Athens, Phoebe has also worked on excavations in Italy and Cyprus, but certainly she is best known for her exhibitions, publications, and leadership in the museum field. Since 2008, Phoebe has worked at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, which houses one of the finest collections of ancient Greek and Roman art, not only in the United States, but anywhere in the world. Starting as a curatorial research associate, she advanced to assistant curator in 2011 and to her current role as the Mary Bryce Comstock Curator of Greek and Roman Art in 2016. She is also now the co-chair of the Museums and Exhibitions Committee of the Archaeological Institute of America. She has spoken on and organized panels at numerous museum and academic conferences on topics ranging from ancient coinage and object-based learning to unscientific find spot information and the afterlives of ancient objects. Her current book project, which is meant for general readers, focuses on the afterlife, the long and fascinating modern history of two Etruscan masterpieces at the MFA, a pair of stone sarcophagi discovered at the Etruscan site of Volci in 1846 and eventually transported to Boston. Her recent work, together with a conservator treating that object, has uncovered some new and exciting details, and I'm certain that this book will underscore their continuing relevance for today's audiences. And that idea of the relevance of ancient objects is something that I think Phoebe keenly understands, as we're about to find out. During her time at the MFA, she has helped to organize a major loan exhibition, Aphrodite and the Gods of Love. She has co-curated a new installation of the MFA's renowned collection of ancient coins and served as the lead curator on the reinstallation of 3 permanent collection galleries. The first focused on Homer and the epics, the second on daily life in ancient Greece, and the third, the focus of her talk today, on early Greek art from the 8th to the early 5th centuries BC. I was fortunate enough to visit the MFA to see these galleries just a couple of months ago, and I can promise you that we're in for a treat this afternoon, and that many of you, I think, will want to book your tickets to Boston once you hear more about all that is now on view there. So please join me in welcoming my friend and colleague, Phoebe Segal, to the podium.
Thank you for that incredibly warm welcome. This is my first time in Cleveland, and wow, it has completely impressed me. I spent most of yesterday in the galleries with my jaw hanging on the ground. What a wonderful city and museum. And I wanted to thank especially my new friends, the Collis family, particularly Mary Beth, who reached out to me well in advance to make me feel so welcome, and to Mrs. Helen Collis. I only wish that I had met Dr. Collis, and it's wonderful and a great honor to be the first Collis lecturer in person since his passing. Just a note about Seth. As he mentioned, we met in the Agora in the summer of 1999. He didn't say he had broken his leg and he was in a full cast and crutched to the Agora. It's about a 35-minute walk without crutches, every day. I had never seen anybody so dedicated in my life, and it's been wonderful to see the beautiful Greek and Roman collection here with him, and to see him and his family thriving in Cleveland. He clearly, it was a match made in heaven for him to come here. And I also wanted to say thank you to my other new friend, Heather Brown, who I had a wonderful time getting to know at last night's dinner. So, the subject of my lecture today is a new installation of Greek art dating from about 900 BCE until the Persian invasion of Greece in 480. The MFA, like the Cleveland Museum of Art, has one of the oldest and most distinguished collections of Greek and Roman antiquities in America. In preparing my talk, I was reminded of the many parallels between the two collections, and throughout my remarks, I will draw connections between them as time permits. The Early Greek Gallery is one of 5 new galleries the MFA opened in December of last year. The map you see here represents the master plan of Greek, Roman, Byzantine, and Etruscan art as conceived by Christine Condolian in 2006. Some of you may remember Christine from when she was the Collis Lecturer, and we think that this was in about 2001 when she came to lecture about the Antioch Mosaic Show, which came to Cleveland. Christine retired from her position as George D. and Margot Barakis Chair of Art of Ancient Greece and Rome this past September 1st, and she asked me to convey her greetings and fond wishes. On the left is a timeline of the galleries we've renovated during the past decade, with the most recent group highlighted in orange in the map on the right. These renovations include significant architectural and systems upgrades, the addition of air conditioning, entirely new custom-designed casework by the Italian firm Gopion, based in Milan, and in the most recent phase, the addition of clear-story windows in 2 of the galleries, which you can see one example here. And this necessitated the raising of the ceiling height by 8 to 10 feet. Renovating the galleries in stages has some inefficiencies. However, some of the advantages of rolling them out over a period of time are the opportunity to learn from visitor feedback and the ability to be responsive to the rapidly changing world around us. This includes refining our interpretive strategies to be more inclusive and engaging than ever. I'm out of sequence. In our recent project, we were more intentionally collaborative, more outward-facing, and more visitor-centric than ever before. And not only have the galleries been very well received by our visitors, but also the process was deeply satisfying on a professional level. The work product is, in fact, stronger when we do it together, and a talented team of conservators, mount makers, designers, interpreters, and many others made the work I'm about to share possible. Before I go into depth regarding the early Greek art gallery, I'd like to frame it literally in the broader context of the presentation of archaic and classical Greek art at the MFA. In approaching the early Greek gallery, I analogized it to a lecture course in which visitors are exposed to the fundamentals of Greek art so that they can engage more deeply with the seminar-style thematic galleries in the adjacent spaces. As it happened, we were able to bring the thematic galleries to fruition first, and so part of my curatorial process was to look back at what we'd already done and find the gaps in an effort to provide a solid foundation. In 2015, we opened a suite of 3 interrelated galleries: Homer and the Epics, Dionysus and the Symposium, and Greek Theater. The Homer Gallery, which, as Seth mentioned, I curated, is devoted to storytelling, and the objects are arranged in a narrative rather than art historical sequence. It features the strongest concentration of works of art with Homeric scenes in any U.S. art museum. And this large wall case that you see on the screen is devoted to the Trojan War and 2 cases feature objects with scenes from the Odyssey. Highlights include a Roman-era portrait head of the blind Homer on the left, and a Hellenistic and humanizing portrayal of the Cyclops Polyphemus, and several celebrated Athenian vases, including my very favorite object in the entire MFA collection, an oversized drinking cup signed by its potter and painter, Hieron and Macron. It depicts the Trojan prince Paris abducting Helen of Sparta, the event that would catalyze the Trojan War, and her reunion with her husband, her rightful husband, Menelaus, at the end of the war, on the right. The next gallery in the suite focuses on the god of wine, Dionysus, the most frequently represented divinity in Greek art, and the all-male drinking party known as the Symposium held in his honor. As Euripides recounts in his play The Bacchae, Dionysus came from the east and brought with him the fruit of the vine. The god is seen here on the right in a 4th century marble head so masterfully carved that its mitra, or its headband, appears to vibrate in person, has this sort of animated life quality. Winemaking was big business in ancient Greece, as attested archaeologically and on coinage carrying symbols of transport jars. Vases for storing, mixing, consuming wine, some of which you see on this banquet table, are among the most frequent objects to survive from Greek antiquity. They very often feature scenes associated with winemaking and the retinue of Dionysus, his followers, satyrs and maenads, and banqueters performing activities common at the symposium, playing drinking games, reciting poetry, playing music, and making love. The final gallery in this sequence is Greek theater, which segues naturally from the Symposium gallery because Dionysus was also the god of the theater. The esteemed Athenian playwright Aeschylus is quoted by later ancient sources as referring to his works as the mere leftovers from the great banquet of Homer. The earliest Greek plays were dithyrambics, choral poems, performed in Dionysus's honor at religious festivals. And the gallery features objects associated with and illustrative of dramatic and comedic performances. The rarest object in the gallery is an early 5th century mixing bowl representing in graphic splendor scenes from the trilogy known as the Oresteia. On the first side, that is the left, we witness the murder of Agamemnon as he steps out of his bath. You can see he's wearing a transparent robe. And on the reverse, his son Orestes avenging his father's killing by killing his murderer, Aegisthus. In December 2017, we opened another thematic gallery, which complements those just described. It focuses on daily life in ancient Greece and draws visitors into the past through familiar scenes, such as a terracotta figurine of a barber cutting hair, children playing with toys, scenes from the everyday lives of men and women, images of artists at work, and utilitarian objects such as loom weights. One highlight is a rare scene in which a young woman visits a shoemaker for a fitting in the company of her father. On the reverse of the vase, a blacksmith prepares to strike a metal bar with a sledgehammer. Turning to the early Greek gallery, the strength of the MFA's collection of Greek art dating from the 8th to the 6th centuries BC cannot be overstated. It's one of the best outside Greece, and yet this formative period in Greek art is still underappreciated by many. In fact, even referring to it as Greek art, is something of a misnomer because it perpetuates the idea that the Greeks were a monolithic group, when in fact, they identified themselves as Athenians, Spartans, Corinthians, Thebans, and so on, and were always in competition with one another, if not at outright war. Recognizing that most people regard the artistic achievements of 5th century Athens as the acme of Greek art, I sought to rewind the tape, as it were, and to demonstrate to visitors how the qualities that they prize so highly in classical art were actually present in Greek art from its earliest days. Another goal was to renegotiate the remit of the gallery, which was originally conceptualized as a chronological and regional overview of early Greek art. Curatorial practice has evolved quite a bit since 2006, and the overwhelmingly positive response to the thematic galleries just described caused me to think twice about presenting the earlier material in a strictly art historical manner. I worried that I would lose people if I didn't strike the right balance between a chronological regional approach and a thematic one. And after a lot of consideration and many conversations with colleagues, both at the MFA and in the field, I devised a two-part plan. An introductory space, which you see here, presents the development of early Greek art along two important trajectories: the birth of narrative in the middle of the 8th century BC, and approaches to the human body in the 6th. The second part of the gallery exposes the tension in early Greek art between firmly held local and regional identities and visual vocabularies on the one hand, and the impact of the rapidly expanding horizons of the Greek world through trade and colonization on the other hand. The gallery begins by showcasing some of the most important early Greek objects, not just at the MFA, but in the world. They are displayed on individual pedestals so that they can be appreciated fully in the round. Among them are the famed Manticlos Apollo, which you see on the left, which has long been regarded as embodying the transition from geometric to archaic art because of its unique combination of planar and rounded forms. The dedicatory inscription on his thighs reads, "Manticlos dedicated me as a tithe to the far shooter, the bearer of the silver bow. You, Phoebus," the shining one, me, no, "give something pleasing in return, and attests to the reciprocal relationship that characterized Greek votive religion." To one side of Manticlos, to the right side actually, is a 9-lobed gold libation bowl carrying an inscription saying that it was dedicated by the sons of the Corinthian tyrant Cypselus, with spoils from their exploits at Heraclea, an ancient city that has never been found. It is the only dedication of its type and material to survive, although we know from temple treasuries that other gold examples existed. On the other side of Manticlos is a late archaic bronze statue of Hermes Kriophoros, the ram bearer, and I'm going to give you a challenge to find the ram bearer in the galleries here in Cleveland, which is really wonderful. In my experience, in every project, there is an object or handful of objects that reveal themselves to be more captivating, interesting, and or important than I had expected. Often they are the underappreciated or ignored examples, but every once in a while, they are the ones that are already celebrated. In this gallery, it was Hermes carrying a ram to sacrifice that wouldn't let go of my attention. The exquisite detail in dress and hairstyle, the sensitive attention to musculature, the animation conveyed by the advancing left leg, but above all, the way that the ram facing perpendicular to Hermes' gaze dynamically expands the force field of the sculpture. The inventive composition breaks with the frontality of archaic sculpture and demands that the spectator move their body to experience it as a fully three-dimensional object. The literal centerpieces of the gallery are the relief sculptures from the 6th century temple of Athena at Assos, which you see positioned overhead on a freestanding post and lintel support. They feature two groups. On the left, Heracles as archer, chasing away a group of centaurs, and on the right, confronted sphinxes with their forepaws resting on a column. Assos was a Greek city located on the western coast of Turkey, present-day Baramkale, and the volcanic stone temple dates to about 530 BCE. It was excavated in the 1880s by the newly founded and still Boston-based, Archaeological Institute of America, which in turn gifted its share of the finds to the also fledgling MFA. As archaeologically pedigreed temple decoration, they constitute a rare holding in a U.S. art museum. And the audacious decision to display them in such a manner stemmed from my desire to give our visitors a sense of them as part of religious architecture and to demonstrate how the images overhead mediated between the worlds of the mortal and the divine. To assist visitors in their understanding of the original context of the frieze, we commissioned this digital reconstruction of the temple by Massimo Limoncelli of the University of Palermo. And you can see that those red rectangles call out the location of our sections of the frieze on the original temple. The Assos frieze serves as the backdrop for the first part of the gallery, which, as I mentioned earlier, is organized chronologically along two themes: approaches to the human body and the birth of narrative in Greek art. The narrative case supports the Homer Gallery next door, which you can see peeking through on the right. The Homer Gallery with its focus on storytelling. It begins by highlighting the oldest object in the gallery, a small Athenian pitcher dating to about 900 BCE, a gift from the Greek government to the MFA in 1914. Non-figural, it's on the left in this slide. It is decorated with semicircles drawn with a compass. And to its right are two of the earliest figural scenes on Greek pottery, a fox hunt on the left and a combat scene, both of which were activities performed by and associated with elites in the 8th century. A tiny Corinthian jar for luxurious perfume deliberately echoes Assyrian art in its depiction of the local hero Bellerophon encountering the monster Chimera. This small vessel carries the earliest identifiable mythological scene in the MFA's collection. The section on approaches to the body features the ideal archaic types of the kouros and the chore and provides the foundation for the activities performed by elite men and women in the daily life gallery next door. A subtly carved kouros, although less complete than your wonderful example, which I had the great pleasure to see yesterday, anchors this section. And you can see that you can see all the red paint on the back of his hair, which is very rare to survive so vibrantly. The selection and arrangement of objects demonstrates how the types were used flexibly for votive and funerary purposes, and how a range of media, including terracotta, made them affordable to less affluent consumers. So too, regional differences in the approach to chorai are apparent when seeing the East Greek and mainland examples side by side. And I'm going to show some parallels quickly from the Cleveland collection. Let me go back for a moment. So actually this is actually from the Cleveland collection on the right, and I'm just bringing it into parallel with the MFA object in the center of that grouping. And similarly, this, what we call caryatid mirror, the MFA, you can see two examples that are fragmentary, where we don't have the disc, much less the handle, which you have in Cleveland. So another connection between the collections. Another highlight of the gallery is the rare amphora featuring Heracles driving a bull to sacrifice, called bilingual because it employs both black and red figure vase painting techniques. Paired with it is a 5-minute animated film called Figures in Red, about the invention of red figure technique in Athens around 530. The most common audience questions I have been asked over the years pertain to how Greek vases were made, and they inspired me to make this film. But my MFA colleagues and I chose Zedem Media, a Cyprus-based animation studio, to help us tell our story. Our two main goals were to conjure a sense of awe at this moment of creativity, of an artist seeing something that the rest of us don't see. That's what I think artists do in whatever medium they work in. And at the same time, to impart a feeling of reverence for the centuries of dogged experimentation, trial and error that resulted in the technical expertise in firing, and that allowed for the high contrast red and black brand of Athenian vases. So we're going to play the video for you.
Welcome to Athens. 2,500 years ago, this is the neighborhood where Athenian vase makers lived and worked. It's called the Keramikos, the origin of the English word ceramic. Meet Antiquities, a highly regarded master potter. This is his workshop. In the 6th century BCE, Athenian vases were prized far and wide for their superior shapes and designs. Their glossy black images stood out against a red background. This painting technique that we now call black figure was passed down from master to apprentice for generations.
Good morning, boss.
Good morning. Careful there, Simon.
Yes, sir. Here's yesterday's batch. Polished and primed for painting.
Very good. Your burnishing skills have improved. Now, it's time to paint. Where's that slip we prepared a few days ago?
Slip is essential to the vase's distinctive look. It's made by mixing together clay, water, and a special chemical that helps the smaller clay particles rise to the top. That slurry becomes the slip. He applies the slip with a brush and then carves fine details with a pointed stylus.
Precision and detail make stories come alive. You see here, this figure is now just a man. But once you add the lion skin and the knotted club...
Heracles!
Exactly.
The workshops of the Keramikos favored black figure for most of the 6th century. Until one day.
Simon, hold it there.
We don't know exactly when it happened or what inspired it.
I'm seeing something.
But one visionary potter had a brilliant idea.
Bring me the thinnest brush you can find. I'm going to try something new on this side.
Antiquities begins to apply the slip to the background, leaving the figures untouched.
Boss, you're painting the wrong part.
This time, he paints the details with a fine brush.
Why didn't I think of this before? All right, Simon, it's time to fire up the kiln.
Right away.
Inside the kiln, the slip will transform. Firing is done in 3 stages. First, the vase is baked to bring out the red color of the clay. Next, damp wood is added to the fire. The kiln's vent is closed and the heat increases. The lack of oxygen turns the vase black and the slip becomes glassy. Finally, the kiln's vent is reopened. As the temperature drops, the unpainted surface turns red once more, while the slip-painted designs remain black.
Wow.
Simon, let's show our merchant friend our latest creation.
Oh my, what on earth?
I call it Figures in Red.
The finest Athenian craftsmanship.
The pictures, you've brought them to life. I want at least a dozen in this new style. My customers will love them.
And just like that, red figure vases took the Greek world by storm, surpassing black figure in popularity.
Job well done, boss.
Millennia later, tens of thousands of black figure and red figure vases survive. But vases like this one, that show both styles at once, These are extremely rare.
Remember this, Simon. A great artist is always looking for new ways to tell their story.
Thank you very much. I hope you all noticed the goat. Our colleagues in Cyprus it was their idea to include the goat. And I think it just brings home that these were real people. And we have to be imaginative to think about their lives and what motivated them. But thank you. So, go back to the gallery. Okay. The larger space of the gallery explores the tension in early Greek art between closely held local and regional identities and the expansion of Greek horizons through trade and colonization, all against the backdrop of the emergence of the Greek city-state as a distinct, in some cases self-governed, political entity. And this is the aspect of early Greece that since my college days I have found most inspiring. And yet the emergence of the city-state is not something easily illustrated with a collection mostly acquired via the antiquities market. In the background of this photo is a case highlighting the stylistic diversity in Greek art in 3 different regions, plus the island of Cyprus with its unique culture. The groupings exemplify the specific visual vocabularies of each and the common purposes the shapes were used for in their everyday and ritual functions. The MFA is particularly rich in art from an area called East Greece by archaeologists. As early as the 10th century BCE, mainland Greeks immigrated to the western coast of modern Turkey and nearby Greek islands, so Samos, Chios, Lesbos, and Rhodes, to name a few. Residents in the cosmopolitan cities that developed there interacted with neighboring cultures, including the rich kingdoms of Anatolia, so Lydia and Phrygia, and many others. Searching for additional opportunities, Greeks from this region founded the city of Naucratis in the Nile Delta at the end of the 7th century. So that's in Egypt. Proximity to these established cultures affected not only the look of East Greek art, but also the materials and forms they employed. So for example, the distinctive metalwork seen in elaborate groupings of ornaments, some with protective imagery adapted from Near Eastern art, were sewn into funerary shrouds and headgear, adorning and protecting the remains of the deceased. They were made using a technique known as repoussé, French for pushed up, which involves painstakingly hammering the designs from the reverse side. And this careful technique was utilized to create the figural imagery on the electrum plaques you see here. Now, in Cleveland, you have 2 masterful plaques that I think the label said they were made in cloisonné technique, and that's something we can talk about more perhaps later, but just to show these extraordinary examples from Cleveland. Differing regional approaches in early Greece are also apparent in the form of funerary monuments, from ceramic vessels that once contained cremated human remains to vessels and stone stelae that served as grave markers. 2 of the most popular objects in the MFA's ancient collection are the lion from Perachora, that's near Corinth, now positioned, finally, liberated off the wall, so that his magnificent mane can be appreciated. and a sphinx, which is, you see just in the left-hand side, atop a volute, which retains much of its original polychromy. So that sphinx stood on top of a stele. Object conservation has played a critical role in all these gallery renovations. The condition of every object is assessed, carefully documented, and treated for structural and aesthetic reasons as needed. The most significant treatment performed for the early Greek gallery, and it is, I must confess, still ongoing, we're almost there, is the restoration of a ceramic sarcophagus rim from the city of Klazomenai, which is near modern-day Izmir, ancient Smyrna. Over 100 of these coffins exist, and you see this here, sorry, in the center of the slide. Over 100 of these coffins exist, but very few are in American collections. I think besides the MFA, the Getty, the Met, Princeton, I'm probably forgetting others, but they are rare. The MFA's example had been in storage for nearly 2 decades when we brought it up to the Conservation Lab for examination in 2019. And this is a detail of the before and almost after that our conservator took. It had substantial losses in the head and foot pieces, so this is the headpiece, rendering the imagery difficult to read. With careful research, a tremendous amount of patience, and excellent artistic and hand skills, conservator Leanne Gordon has been able to fill in gaps to make the scenes more legible. Her work revealed, and you can see this best in the bottom image, a beautifully tender scene of a man saying goodbye to his wife and 3 children as he prepares to board a chariot, an appropriate subject for a funerary object. And in the next slide, on the foot piece, that is the bottom of the sarcophagus rim, we now can really see the animal combat and this bull on its backside being attacked by 2 large felines from either side. The centerpiece of the second half of the gallery is a case that is tripartite in concept. The front features a map with objects embedded to visualize the transmission of objects and ideas via trade, beginning in the 9th century. The map makes it possible to see the trade routes and follow object biographies. For example, on the right, a monkey-shaped perfume flask made in Rhodes, heavily influenced by Egypt in material and iconography, and found in the Bay of Naples, allowing visitors to appreciate how truly global the world has been for a long, long time. 2 groupings of objects on the other side of the case explore related themes. The first, on the left, is alphabetic writing, the principal technology the Greeks adopted from their trading partners, the Phoenicians. The appearance of writing in Greece is much debated, but it probably occurred in the late 9th century and might have been adopted for the purpose of naming their cargo. The earliest writing survives in the form of inscriptions on objects, and the MFA has examples dating back to 700 BCE. The second theme is the representation of the peoples the Greeks came into contact with beyond the mainland and their varied attitudes towards foreigners. On the one hand, the Greeks were genuinely curious about other peoples, and on the other hand, they invented the word xenophobia for a reason. The objects in this case mostly date to the late 6th century Athens, which was a very multicultural city at the time. At least 20 foreign cults have been documented in its port, Piraeus, and there are many examples of vase makers in Athens who sign their works with the use of ethnic identifiers such as the Syrian, the Lydian. One even signed a trustworthy foreigner. And I must say that Seth's work on this topic is both pioneering and inspiring, and is the reason that I made sure to include this topic in our early Greek gallery. So, one of the peoples who most fascinated the Greeks were those they called Ethiopians. Greek for blaze-faced, because they attributed skin color to environmental factors. Herodotus describes them as living south of Egypt and as a beautiful, long-limbed people with great longevity. The Ethiopians are mentioned in Greek poetry as early as Homer, having been allies to the Trojans, and are represented in Greek art beginning in the middle of the 6th century. The face-shaped vessels you see in this photo are presumed to represent Ethiopians, and they were used in elite activities such as athletics and the all-male drinking parties held in honor of the god Dionysus. And I'll just point out that you have probably the rarest combination in Cleveland. Seth and I were just puzzling over this object yesterday in the galleries, which juxtaposes a satyr, a bearded satyr, with a bearded Ethiopian, and it's really one of a kind. So, in conclusion, or by way of conclusion, I'd like to touch on an aspect of this project that is vitally important: the engagement of younger generations. With my colleagues in the creative and learning and community engagement departments, I created a short video featuring the perspectives of 5 Boston area college students on the relevance of ancient art, why museums matter, and their hopes for the future. College students are the bridge between youth and adults, and as interlocutors between the museum and its visitors, have the greatest potential to appeal to a wide audience. Throughout the video, the 5 students touch on broad themes of the relevance of ancient art embedded in the galleries. They include how and why societies tell stories through their art, the culturally determined nature of ideals and why ideals persist so powerfully, the motivations behind and the sources of artistic innovation, the tensions in society between the receptiveness to and the rejection of the new and unfamiliar, and finally, the obvious and not so obvious ways that social status expresses itself in art and material culture. In a world in which museums are expected to be more responsive to their audiences than ever, and with a collection that has the potential to speak to so many different aspects of human experience, it's critical that we listen to the voices of impassioned young people. These galleries are for them and those who come after. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Phoebe. That was wonderful. I mentioned that I have been to Boston recently to see these galleries, and I have to admit I missed a couple of these things, so I'll have to go back, and I hope that all of you will find your way there. And I also want to thank Phoebe for pointing out so many parallels in our collection here, and I would invite all of you, if you have time, to go visit our galleries and look for some of those objects. Some of the objects that we have, I think, are certainly worth a closer look, and I hope Phoebe has opened your mind to what we might be looking for. And I also, before saying goodbye, want to announce next year's Collis Lecture, which, as you see, will be on a very, very different topic. Almost exactly 1 year from today, we'll switch from ancient Greece to wandering a Greek path, El Greco's modernism. Our speaker, as you can see, is Charlie Barber from Princeton University. So mark your calendars, and don't worry, we'll be sending lots of reminders. But thank you again, everyone, for coming. Please join me in thanking Phoebe once more, and enjoy the rest of your day.